The limousine slowed at a red light on Fifth Avenue, and through the tinted glass, Alexander Gray saw a small girl kneeling in the snow, her fingers raw as she clutched a paper cup. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Spare some change, please?" He almost looked away, until she lifted her head and her eyes, the same gray-green as his own, locked on him. Before we start, comment below. Would you forgive someone who once humiliated you? Tap like and subscribe for more stories that touch the soul. Alexander Gray's world was measured in numbers. By 39, he had built Gray Enterprises from a cramped apartment into one of the largest private equity firms in New York. Every headline called him the visionary, the young titan, the man who never loses. His penthouse on Central Park West glittered with glass and marble, but its silence was so thick he often left the television playing just to hear another voice. That January morning began like every other. A 6 a.m. conference call, espresso brewed to the second, and a skyline blurred by winter fog. His assistant, Jordan, read numbers while Alexander scrolled through emails. "Quarterlies are up 18%, Jordan said. Alexander nodded, but didn't smile. Success no longer thrilled him. It simply maintained the illusion that he was fine. When the meeting ended, he stared at the photo on his desk, the only one he had kept. A woman with auburn hair held a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The image was 10 years old, taken before Lydia walked out and left nothing but a note. "I can't compete with your empire." He hadn't heard from her since. He told himself she'd moved on, remarried, maybe left the country. That lie was easier than wondering if she ever forgave him for choosing boardrooms over bedtime stories. At noon, he stepped into his limousine for another meeting across town. The city was gray and wet, snow slushing beneath tires. His phone buzzed with stock alerts until his driver, an older man named Hank, hesitated at an intersection. "Sorry, sir. Traffic's jammed on Madison. I'll detour through Lexington." Alexander barely looked up. "Fine." They rolled past shuttered shops and steam vents hissing through the cold. Pedestrians hunched beneath umbrellas. It was a neighborhood Alexander hadn't visited in years, the kind of place he used to live before success erased the smell of cheap coffee and rain-soaked pavement. Then he saw her. A little girl, maybe 9, sat on the curb outside a closed bakery. Her coat was torn at the sleeve, her shoes soaked through. She wasn't calling out like the others. She simply held out a paper cup, her eyes fixed on the ground as people streamed past. Something twisted inside him. "Stop," he said. Hank braked hard. "Sir?" "Back up. Right there. By the bakery." The door clicked open and cold air knifed into the car. Alexander stepped out, the snow crunching beneath his shoes. For a man used to marble floors, the street felt alien. He approached the girl slowly, unsure why his chest tightened with every step. "Hey," he said quietly, kneeling to her level. "Are you all right?" She looked up. Her face was pale from the cold, freckles scattered across her cheeks like fading stars. But it was her eyes that froze him, gray-green, flecked with gold, his color. She blinked. "I'm fine, mister." Her voice was small but polite. She clutched the cup tighter. He swallowed hard. "What's your name?" "Lily." The world tilted. Lily. The name he and Lydia had chosen before she was born. He forced a smile to hide the quake in his voice. "Pretty name. How old are you, Lily?" 9. His pulse roared in his ears. 9. Lydia had left when their baby was barely a year old. 9 years ago. He tried to speak again, but a woman's voice called from across the street, hoarse and tired. "Lily, come here, sweetheart." The girl turned. A thin woman in a worn coat was waving weakly from a coffee stand. Her auburn hair peeked from beneath a knit hat. Alexander's breath caught. Lydia. Before he could move, Lily ran to her. Lydia knelt, hugging the child close. Even from a distance, Alexander could see how frail she looked, too pale, too thin. He wanted to shout her name, but his throat locked. The light changed, and horns blared. Hank leaned out the window. "Mr. Gray, we've got to move!" Alexander stepped back, eyes still fixed on the pair. Lydia handed Lily a small sandwich and brushed snow from her hair. They were laughing softly, oblivious to the man watching from the street. He climbed back into the limo, heart pounding. "Follow them," he said. Hank frowned in the mirror. "Sir?" "Just do it." They trailed the two figures for several blocks until they disappeared into an alley of old apartments. Alexander memorized the address. When he reached home that night, the penthouse felt colder than ever. He poured himself a drink, but the whiskey burned without comfort. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that child's face, Lily's face, and Lydia's frail figure beside her. He paced the living room, debating if he was delusional. Could it really be her? Maybe she had another child. Maybe it was coincidence, but the eyes, the age, the name, it was too precise. By midnight, he couldn't stand it anymore. He called a private investigator. "Find out everything you can about a woman named Lydia Gray, last known in New York City. Check shelters, hospitals, anywhere." The investigator paused. "Gray? As in your surname?" "Yes, and keep this discreet." He hung up and walked to the window. The city glittered below, millions of lights blinking like promises he no longer believed. Somewhere in that sprawl, his daughter might be sleeping on a cold mattress. He pressed his hand to the glass, his reflection staring back, a man who owned skyscrapers, but not a single memory of his child's laughter. For the first time in years, Alexander Gray whispered a prayer he didn't know he remembered. Please, let it be her. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, relentless, and silent, covering the city that had given him everything and the one thing he'd never thought to look for. If you suddenly saw someone from your past who changed everything you believed, would you have the courage to face them? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
The next morning, Alexander didn't go to his office. For the first time in years, the corner suite that usually buzzed with phone calls and executives waiting for orders sat empty. He couldn't bring himself to care about meetings or markets. The only numbers echoing in his mind were 9, her age, and the address he'd memorized the night before. He waited impatiently until noon before his investigator called. "I found her, Mr. Gray," the man said. "Lydia Gray, formerly your wife. She's been living under her maiden name, Lydia Carter. Apartment 3B, East Harlem. Works night shifts at a diner. No record of remarriage." Alexander's throat tightened. "And the child?" "Lily Carter, age 9. No father listed on school forms." The silence that followed was thick and brittle. His voice cracked when he finally said, "Thank you." He hung up and stood there, staring out over the city, his empire stretching for miles, and for the first time, it all felt meaningless. By dusk, he was sitting in the back of the limousine again, watching gray buildings slide by. When Hank stopped near the apartment block, Alexander told him to wait. He stepped out into the freezing wind, pulling up his collar as he approached the crumbling steps. The building smelled of damp walls and fried onions. The elevator didn't work, so he climbed the stairs, heart pounding harder with every floor. When he reached 3B, he hesitated. His hand hovered over the door. What was he supposed to say? "Hi, I'm the man who forgot you existed?" Before he could knock, the door creaked open. Lily stood there, clutching a half-eaten sandwich, her eyes wide. She frowned slightly. "You're the man from yesterday." Alexander froze. "You remember me?" "Yeah, you stared at me." He winced. I didn't mean to. I just thought you looked familiar." From inside, a woman's voice called, "Lily, who is it?" Lydia stepped into view. Time stopped. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray at the ends. She wore a faded sweater and jeans torn at the knees, but her eyes, warm hazel and fierce, were exactly as he remembered. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then her face hardened. "What are you doing here?" Alexander swallowed. "I needed to see you, both of you." "After 9 years?" she said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I didn't know where you were, Lydia." "You didn't look, Alexander." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Lily looked between them, confused. "Mom, do you know him?" Lydia crouched beside her, her expression softening. "Sweetheart, go finish your homework, okay?" "But, please, Lily." Reluctantly, the girl retreated to the small table in the corner. When she was out of earshot, Lydia turned back to him. "You have 5 minutes, then you leave." Alexander stepped inside. The apartment was small. A single couch, peeling wallpaper, a heater that clicked constantly. He noticed medical bills stacked on the counter. "I didn't know you were living like this," he said quietly. "I didn't ask for your pity." "It's not pity," he murmured. "It's guilt." That stopped her. For a moment, the anger in her eyes faltered. He took a slow breath. "Lydia, she's mine, isn't she?" Her shoulders tensed. "Does it matter now?" "It matters to me." Lydia's eyes filled, but she looked away. "Yes, she's your daughter." The words hit him harder than any boardroom loss ever had. He stared toward the corner where Lily was humming softly over a notebook, her small hand clutching a pencil too short to hold. 9 years of missed birthdays. 9 Christmases without her laughter. He'd been chasing numbers while his own child begged for food. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "Why didn't you tell me? I would have—" "You would have what?" Lydia snapped. "Sent money? Put her on your tax deductions? You were too busy proving to the world how untouchable you were." Her words sliced deep, because they were true. Lydia sighed and sat across from him. "After I left, I tried to manage on my own. I thought pride could feed us. It couldn't. Then Lily got sick last year and I had to take double shifts. Things fell apart." "Why didn't you call me?" "Because I didn't want her growing up like you," she said softly. "Cold, distant. I wanted her to know kindness before she knew power." He looked at her, eyes shining. "Lydia, I've changed." She gave a sad smile. "People like you don't change, Alexander. You rebuild, rebrand, recover, but you don't change." Before he could answer, Lily came back carrying a crumpled drawing. "Mom, look, I drew our house." Alexander glanced down. The sketch showed 2 stick figures, a woman and a little girl, standing in front of a sun and a crooked apartment building. No father. Lydia smiled and kissed Lily's forehead. "That's beautiful, honey." Lily beamed, then looked at Alexander shyly. "Are you Mom's friend?" He hesitated. Something like that. Lydia cut in quickly. Mr. Gray was just leaving. The dismissal burned, but he nodded. He stood slowly, his gaze lingering on the child who didn't yet know she belonged to him. Goodbye, Lily. Bye, mister. She waved politely, then returned to her drawing. As Alexander stepped into the hall, Lydia followed him out and closed the door behind them. Don't come back, she whispered. You'll just confuse her. I can't pretend she doesn't exist anymore. She deserves better than this. Let me help. I don't need your help. But she does, he said quietly. And whether you like it or not, I'm her father. Her eyes filled, anger and exhaustion blurring into something else. She doesn't know you. Don't ruin what little peace she has left. He met her gaze. I ruined enough already. Please, Lydia. Let me fix this. She shook her head and went back inside, locking the door behind her. Alexander stood there for a long time, listening to the faint sound of Lily's laughter through the thin wall. It was the sweetest and most painful sound he had ever heard. When he finally walked down the stairs, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to lose her again. If you were in Lydia's place, would you forgive someone who abandoned you, no matter how much they've changed?
The winter storm rolled in fast. By the time Alexander's car reached East Harlem again, the streets were slick with slush, the air bitter and sharp. He'd told himself he wouldn't come back, that Lydia's words should have been enough to drive him away. But something inside him refused to rest. He had spent a lifetime closing deals, solving crises, controlling outcomes. But this was different. This wasn't a boardroom problem. This was his daughter. When he reached the apartment, he noticed the lights were still on despite the late hour. He hesitated, then climbed the stairs, heart pounding. The sound that greeted him on the third floor wasn't laughter this time. It was coughing, deep, ragged, relentless. He didn't knock. He pushed open the door. Lydia was on the couch, her face pale, sweat beading on her forehead. Lily knelt beside her, crying softly, "Mommy, please wake up." Alexander's chest tightened. What happened? Lily spun around, startled. "You came back!" He knelt beside Lydia, touching her forehead. She was burning. "She's been sick all week. I tried to get her medicine, but—" Her words dissolved into tears. Alexander scooped Lydia into his arms. "We're going to the hospital, now." Lily grabbed her coat, following close behind as he carried her mother down the stairs. The night air hit them like ice. The limo door slammed, and Hank, wide-eyed, floored the accelerator toward Mount Sinai Hospital. They admitted Lydia immediately. The doctor met Alexander in the hallway minutes later, shaking his head. "She's severely anemic, dehydrated, and has untreated pneumonia. She must have been ignoring symptoms for weeks. Another few days, and she might not have made it." Alexander gripped the edge of the counter. "Will she be okay?" "She needs rest, medication, and proper nutrition. She's lucky you brought her when you did." "Lucky I came back." The thought stung more than it soothed. When he returned to the waiting area, Lily was curled up on a plastic chair, clutching her mother's worn scarf. She looked so small, too small for everything she had endured. He sat beside her quietly. "She's going to be okay." Lily looked up, eyes glistening. "Promise?" "Yes," he said softly, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "I promise." She leaned against him, and for a moment he froze. Then he wrapped an arm around her. She fit perfectly there, as though she'd been meant to all along. For the next 2 days, Alexander barely left the hospital.
He arranged for Lydia to be moved into a private room and made sure the bills were handled before the staff even mentioned payment. When Lydia finally opened her eyes, she saw him sleeping in a chair beside her bed, his suit wrinkled, hair messy, a man stripped of everything except remorse. Her voice was weak. "You shouldn't be here." He woke instantly. "Don't talk like that. You've got a company to run. I've got a family to save." She stared at him for a long moment, searching for sarcasm, but there was none. He reached for her hand hesitantly. "You should have told me you were sick." Her lips trembled. "I didn't want your charity." "This isn't charity, Lydia. It's what I should have done years ago." Her eyes softened briefly before she looked away. "You can't undo 9 years with one rescue." "I know, but maybe I can start by not running anymore." That evening, Lily wouldn't leave his side. She insisted on sitting with him in the hospital cafeteria, swinging her legs from the tall chair as she sipped hot chocolate. "Are you Mom's boss?" she asked suddenly. Alexander smiled faintly. "Not exactly." "Then why do you care so much?" He hesitated, studying her face. Every word he wanted to say felt too heavy, too complicated. "Because your mom once meant everything to me. And so do you." She tilted her head, curious. "Do I know you?" His throat tightened. "Not yet, but you will." She smiled, that small, shy smile that made his heart ache, and returned to her drink. Days later, when Lydia was discharged, she was too weak to argue when Alexander offered to drive them home. But instead of stopping at the old apartment, he instructed Hank to head north. "Where are we going?" Lydia asked, frowning. "My place," Alexander said simply. "You'll both stay there until you recover." "No, Alexander." He turned to her. "Lydia, please, let me do one decent thing." She sighed, too tired to fight. Lily, meanwhile, pressed her face to the window, gasping as skyscrapers rose and the city lights danced. "Mom, look, it's so pretty!" Alexander caught Lydia's reflection in the glass, the faint smile tugging at her lips as she watched their daughter's wonder. For the first time, hope flickered in his chest. The mansion that once echoed with silence now felt alive again. Lily's laughter filled the hallways as she explored the endless rooms, her tiny feet padding across marble floors. That night, Alexander made her dinner himself, badly. The steak burned, the pasta stuck together, but Lily ate every bite, giggling as she said, "It's yummy." Lydia sat at the table, wrapped in a blanket, watching them. The sight of Alexander fumbling through domestic life was almost surreal. When Lily finally fell asleep on the couch, Lydia whispered, "You don't have to do this, you know." He looked at her, eyes tired but gentle. "Yes, I do." "Why?" Because I'm her father." The words came out steady, grounded, a truth that no longer frightened him. Lydia looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, "You always wanted a legacy. You just never realized it wasn't your company." He nodded slowly. "I know that now." Later that night, Alexander stood by Lily's bedside. The little girl slept peacefully, one hand tucked under her cheek, her breath soft and steady. He reached down and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for all the birthdays I missed, for all the nights you didn't have me." The apology dissolved into the quiet. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Gray, the billionaire, the tycoon, the man who never lost, felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since he was a boy. He cried.
Do you believe a person can truly change after realizing what they've lost? Share your thoughts below.
The next few weeks reshaped everything Alexander thought he knew about life. For the first time, his mornings didn't begin with emails or phone calls. They began with the sound of laughter echoing down marble hallways. He'd never realized how big his house felt until it wasn't empty anymore. Lily had claimed every corner of it. She built pillow forts in the living room, turned the kitchen into a cookie disaster zone, and convinced the head chef to teach her how to flip pancakes. At first, Alexander didn't know what to do with her energy. He had spent years mastering silence, learning to exist in a world of cold efficiency. Lily, on the other hand, radiated chaos, but it was the kind that made the air feel alive again. One morning, he found her sitting cross-legged on the floor of his study, doodling on his financial reports. "Lily," he said with mock sternness, "those papers are very important." She looked up, pencil between her teeth. "Important for what?" "For numbers." She squinted at him. "Do you like numbers?" He chuckled. "I used to." She giggled. "Then you should draw more hearts instead." He stared at the messy page, his serious quarterly report now covered in pink crayon hearts. And for reasons he couldn't explain, his throat tightened. That afternoon, Lydia found him sitting beside Lily, coloring with quiet focus. It was the strangest and most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Never thought I'd see Alexander Gray holding a crayon," she said softly. He looked up, smiling faintly. "Turns out I needed one more color in my life." Lydia's health slowly improved, though her trust in him remained fragile. Every night after Lily went to bed, she'd find Alexander working late in his study. But this time, his laptop was filled with searches like best elementary schools in Manhattan and how to talk to your child about family. One night, she lingered in the doorway, watching him. "You're really trying," she said. He looked up. "I told you I'm not going anywhere this time. Forgive me if it's hard to believe that." He closed the laptop gently. "Then don't believe my words. Watch what I do." It wasn't a grand speech. It was steady, quiet, real. And that frightened her more than anything, because for the first time in years, Lydia wanted to believe him. A week later, Alexander experienced something entirely new. Parent-Teacher Day. Lily had begged him to come. "You have to meet Miss Parker. She says I'm great at spelling." He smiled. "Of course I'll come." When they arrived, the classroom buzzed with laughter. Parents chatted, children ran around showing off drawings. But as soon as Alexander stepped in, the room fell silent for a heartbeat. The billionaire in a tailored suit, looking wildly out of place among worn coats and coffee cups. Miss Parker, a kind-faced woman in her 30s, approached with a nervous smile. "You must be Mr. he said, "Gray, Alexander Gray." Her eyebrows lifted in surprise, but she quickly recovered. "Lily's father, I assume." He hesitated, then nodded with quiet pride. "Yes, I am." Lily grabbed his hand and pulled him to a wall filled with crayon art. "Look, that one's mine!" she exclaimed, pointing to a drawing of 3 figures, a little girl, a woman, and a tall man holding hands. The man's suit was drawn in bright blue, his smile crooked but wide. Alexander felt something shift deep inside him. For the first time, he saw himself through Lily's eyes, not as the powerful billionaire, but simply as a dad. Miss Parker noticed his expression and smiled softly. "She talks about you a lot. She says you're great at spelling." He laughed, embarrassed. "That part's true." Later that evening, after they returned home, Lydia found him sitting on the patio, staring out at the city lights. She joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Lily's never drawn anyone in that spot before. That means something." He nodded, voice low. "I don't deserve her forgiveness, but I'll earn it every day."
Lydia looked at him, eyes glimmering in the soft light. "You sound like a man who's finally learning what matters." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't hurt, the kind that felt like peace. Weeks passed, and the gray mansion slowly turned into a home. Lydia began helping with Alexander's foundation work, organizing charity events, and even advising him on outreach programs for struggling families. One evening, they attended a fundraiser together. Lydia wore a simple navy dress, her hair pinned up elegantly. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off her. When an old business rival approached him and sneered, "Didn't think you'd bring your maid to a gala," Alexander's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his voice calm but sharp. "She's not my maid," he said evenly. "She's the woman who saved my soul." Lydia froze, stunned, but the sincerity in his tone left no room for mockery. When they returned home later, she whispered, "You didn't have to defend me like that." He looked at her, eyes soft. "Yes, I did." For the first time in years, her walls began to crack. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, she yawned and said sleepily, "Daddy?" He froze. The word hung in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. She smiled drowsily. "Good night, Daddy." Alexander's voice trembled. "Good night, sweetheart." He sat there long after she drifted off, his hand resting gently on hers. He had built empires, won wars in boardrooms, and conquered markets. But this small, quiet moment felt like the greatest victory of his life. Do you think forgiveness is something that can be earned, or does it have to be given? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
The past can only stay buried for so long. For weeks, life inside the gray mansion felt like a fairy tale rewritten. Quiet dinners, laughter echoing through the halls, bedtime stories that ended in sleepy smiles. But peace, Lydia had learned, was fragile. And sometimes it shattered when you least expected it. It happened one rainy afternoon. Lydia had gone into Alexander's study looking for a folder from one of the charity events. He was out for a meeting, and she'd promised to help finalize some paperwork. She wasn't snooping, not really. But when she opened the desk drawer, a small leather-bound file caught her eye. Her name was embossed on the label. Curiosity tugged at her. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, spanning nearly a decade. Lydia at the diner where she used to work, Lydia walking Lily to school, Lydia standing outside the hospital with a tired smile. And receipts for rent payments, medical bills, anonymous donations labeled Guardian Account. Her hand trembled as she flipped through the pages. He'd been there, watching, helping, quietly funding their survival while she'd struggled to keep her pride intact. By the time the front door opened downstairs, Lydia's heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Alexander's voice carried through the hall. "Lydia, I'm home." She met him halfway down the staircase, holding the folder like evidence. "You want to explain this?" He froze. His expression shifted from confusion to guilt in seconds. "Lydia, how long?" she demanded. "Since you left," he admitted quietly. The room seemed to tilt. "You knew where we were all along?" "I didn't want to interfere." "Interfere?" Her voice broke. "You watched us struggle, Alexander. You watched your daughter beg on the street." He stepped closer, his voice low and pained. "I didn't know it had gotten that bad. I thought I was helping without making things worse." She shook her head, tears welling. "Helping? You call watching helping? You could have called. You could have been there." "I was ashamed," he said simply. "You left because I drove you away. I didn't think I deserved to be part of your lives." Lydia stared at him, searching his face for a lie. But there was only regret. Raw, naked regret. "Every month," he continued, "I sent the money through a trust. I told myself I was doing the right thing, giving you space, letting you live free of me. But every night I'd check those reports, just to know you were okay. Her hand trembled as she flipped through the pages. "All those years, I hated you. I thought you didn't care." "I cared too much," he whispered. "I just didn't know how to show it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows, filling the silence with a rhythm that matched the ache in their chests. Finally, Lydia dropped the file onto the table. "You should have told me." "I know." "Do you have any idea how humiliating it feels to realize the man who broke you was secretly your savior?" He winced. "I wasn't trying to play hero. I was trying to make up for what I destroyed." Her shoulders slumped. The anger that had carried her this far began to crumble into exhaustion. "Lily asked me last night if we're going to stay here forever." "What did you tell her?" "I didn't know what to say." Alexander took a hesitant step forward. "Tell her she's home. Tell her I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to both of you." Lydia looked up at him, eyes glistening. "You think money fixes everything, Alexander. But what she needs isn't more toys or bigger rooms. She needs consistency, love." He nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll give her, every day, even if you never forgive me." His voice broke on that last line, and something inside Lydia cracked open. The years of pain, pride, and fear all tangled together. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. "Not yet." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said softly. "Just a chance." That night, Lydia couldn't sleep. She walked the empty halls, her mind spinning. Every corner of the house carried a memory now. Lily's laughter, Alexander's quiet patience, the fragile warmth that had begun to root between them. But the file haunted her. He'd been there all along, watching, waiting, carrying his guilt like a ghost. She stepped into the living room and found him sleeping on the couch, a blanket half draped over him. The firelight flickered across his face, softening the lines of power into something vulnerable. For the first time, Lydia saw not the billionaire, but the man she once fell in love with, and the man who was trying, in his own broken way, to be better. She walked over and adjusted the blanket around him, her hand brushing his hair lightly. He stirred. "Lydia?" "Go back to sleep," she whispered. He blinked drowsily. "You should be resting too." "I will," she said softly. "Thank you for saving me that night." He smiled faintly, eyes still closed. "You saved me first." She stood there a long time, watching the man she once swore to forget, and realizing that maybe love doesn't die. It just waits for the right version of you to come back. Would you forgive someone who secretly helped you behind your back, or would it hurt even more to find out that way?
Spring arrived like a sigh of relief. The snow melted from the city's rooftops, and sunlight spilled through the mansion windows again. For the first time in years, Alexander felt like the world wasn't gray anymore. He woke to the sound of laughter, Lily's, echoing through the hallway. She was chasing her kitten across the marble floor, her giggles bouncing off the walls. For a moment, he just stood in the doorway, watching her. That sound, her joy, had become the rhythm of his days. Then his eyes fell on Lydia, who stood at the end of the hall, mug of coffee in hand, smiling faintly as she watched the same scene. She was wearing one of his old shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her hair still tousled from sleep. Something in his chest stirred, not the sharp ache of guilt he'd carried for years, but something gentler. Hope. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," she replied, her voice soft. They stood there for a long moment, comfortable in the silence. Later that afternoon, they went to the park, the three of them. Lily insisted on feeding the ducks, and Alexander carried the bag of crumbs like it was gold. He tripped once on the uneven path, and Lydia laughed so hard she had to hold her stomach. "Don't look at me like that," he said, chuckling. "I'm out of practice." "You've never been in practice," she teased. The playfulness between them was cautious,
but real. The way people flirt when they're remembering what it's like to trust. They sat on a bench as Lily ran ahead to the swings. "Do you ever wonder," Lydia said after a while, "what would have happened if we hadn't fallen apart?" Alexander's gaze followed their daughter. "I think about it every day." She nodded slowly. "Maybe we needed to lose everything to see what really matters." He looked at her. "I lost you. That was everything." The honesty in his tone made her look away, blinking hard. He reached out, his hand brushing hers lightly. "Lydia, I don't expect you to forget what I did, but if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." Her fingers didn't pull away this time. That evening, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing again. This time, a house with 3 stick figures under a rainbow. When she was done, she ran to them and held it up proudly. "Look, it's us!" Alexander smiled. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Lydia crouched beside her. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the tall figure. "That's Daddy, and that's you, and that's me. We're a family." The word hit both adults like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Alexander swallowed hard. "Can I keep it?" Lily grinned. "Only if you promise to hang it somewhere special." "I will," he said. "Right in my office." She giggled and darted off, leaving them in silence again, a silence full of everything they hadn't said. That night, after Lily went to bed, Lydia joined him on the balcony. The city lights shimmered below them, the air cool and sweet. "She's happy here," Lydia said quietly. He nodded. "She's the light I didn't know I needed." Lydia smiled faintly. "She said she wants to stay forever." He turned to her, heart pounding. "And you?" She met his gaze, calm, steady. "I don't know what forever looks like, Alexander, but I know it feels like this." He took a tentative step closer. "Then let's start with now." For the first time in 9 years, she didn't step away. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers trembling. "You look at me like you see the man I used to be," he whispered. She shook her head. "No, Alexander, I see the man you're becoming." And when she leaned forward, their lips met, not in passion, but in peace. The kind of kiss that healed what words never could. Weeks turned into months. Alexander found himself learning to live differently, slower, softer. He traded business meetings for breakfast pancakes, late-night deals for bedtime stories. Lydia joined him at the foundation full-time, helping create programs for single parents and children in need. She'd become the heart of it, and everyone saw the change in him. Even the board members whispered about how the ruthless CEO had somehow turned human. One afternoon, while she was organizing event plans, he walked into her office holding a small box. "What's this?" she asked, arching her eyebrow. He smiled nervously. "Just something I've been meaning to do right." When she opened it, her breath caught. Inside was a simple gold ring. No diamonds, no extravagance, just sincerity. "I'm not asking for the past back. I'm asking for a future, with you, with her." Tears filled her eyes. "Alexander!" He stepped closer. "You once told me money can't fix everything. You were right. But love can. And I finally know how to give it." She covered her mouth, shaking her head, not in refusal, but in belief. "You really have changed." He smiled softly. "Because of you." She looked at him for a long moment, then took his hand. "Yes," she whispered. "But this time, no secrets, no pride, just us." He nodded, slipping the ring gently onto her finger. Just us. Their wedding was small, just close friends, foundation staff, and a few children from the orphanage program Lydia had helped create. Lily was the flower girl wearing a white dress and a grin wide enough to light up the whole garden. When Alexander knelt to hug her after the ceremony, she whispered in his ear, "Now I have a mommy and a daddy forever." He hugged her tight, tears spilling freely. "Yes, sweetheart, forever." Lydia watched them, her heart full. The man she once thought unreachable was now the gentlest part of her world. When Alexander looked up at her, their eyes met across the crowd, a silent promise passing between them. They had been broken, rebuilt, and reborn together. That night, after everyone left, they stood alone under the stars. Lydia leaned into him, her head resting on his chest. "Do you ever wonder," she murmured, "how it could have all gone if we hadn't lost each other?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe we needed to fall apart so we could learn how to love right." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "You sound like a man who believes in second chances." "That's because I got mine." And as the wind carried the sound of distant laughter and the city lights glowed like scattered fireflies below, Alexander Gray, the billionaire who had once lost everything, finally realized what it meant to be truly rich. Would you give someone who once broke you a second chance if they proved they had truly changed? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more emotional stories. And remember, sometimes love isn't found, it's rebuilt. Red.